Hello and welcome to a series of lectures on conservation, especially conservation of biological resources in natural habitats as well as outside natural habitats. As we all know, conservation is the aspect of sustainable use of natural resources where not only are they properly utilized, but their protection in situ as well as ex situ conditions is to be maintained so that not only the present generation but the progenies will also properly utilize them and derive whatever benefits have been provided to us by nature in the form of plants as well as their habitats, and whatever facilities are regenerated by the plants in natural habitats. Today we'll mainly discuss what is the in situ concept of conservation, that is, where any plant or other natural resource is protected in its natural habitat without altering either its habit or its habitat. Now, in situ conservation really is related to the concept of protecting not only the animals and plants in their natural habitats, but also maintaining whatever habitat requirements facilitates their survival. Generally, in natural habitats, whatever conditions are persistent, they cannot be recreated primarily because altitudinal variation, habitat condition variation, as well as other facilities provided by nature itself are more important to the plants than the ones that we can recreate under ex situ conditions. In general, there are many basic strategies which can be used, but the concept is that whatever resources, be it a plant, be it an animal, be it a microbe, or be it the habitat of these, is to be maintained in a way in which no physical or biological parameter gets altered, and this alteration does not in any way affect negatively the potential of the bioresources, especially plants, wherein the quality as well as quantity of the product is maintained at par with what it was ordinarily producing prior to its discovery or prior to its domestication. In nature, once we look at the effects that are destroying the natural habitats as well as the quantity of active components within different types of plants, we have seen that the alteration of any physical features or alteration of any biological composition is together affecting the quality as well as quantity of the product. In regard to this, generally, the concept of conservation is related to not only maintaining what the requirements of the plants and animals and microbes are, but also regularly assessing these without having any drawbacks or side effects on other populations of both plants and animals in the areas in which such conservation sites are selected. In general, the concept of conserving different types of biological resources in natural habitats has helped us to identify basically 6 major types or sites which are known as Now, once we look at these 6 sites of in situ conservation, they have to be created or demarcated in those areas where whatever animals, whatever plants, or whatever microbial wealth or whatever habitat conditions are facilitating their survival is dominant and has a potential to remain persistent throughout the lifespan of that particular site. In India, we know 2 areas, especially Himalayas and the Western Ghats, have been labeled as biodiversity hotspots. Apart from these 2 sites, almost whole of India is having diverse habitats as well as diverse biological wealth. And on this basis, these 6 in situ conservation sites have been distributed and selected evenly throughout different habitats of India. Now, the first and foremost and most important site or important in situ conservation site is known as Biosphere Reserve. In 1979, about 482 biosphere reserves were created in 102 countries, and the concept of these biosphere reserves was not only to maintain biological wealth, but also to maintain whatever physical and other conditions are facilitating the survival of these biological resources. Each biosphere reserve has fundamentally 3 basic functions. These are a function of conservation, a function of development, and a logistic function, wherein the collaborative work of different organizations that maintain these biosphere reserves is actually assessed regularly without negatively affecting the quality and quantity of the product being maintained or conserved in these biosphere reserves. In India, in the year 1986, the establishment of biosphere reserves was started with the establishment of Nilgiri Biosphere Reserve, and at present about 15 biosphere reserves have been created, which are evenly distributed, and in each biosphere reserve, the wealth of different biological resources is regularly assessed, and on the basis of whatever requirements are to be fulfilled for these biological resources, Government of India as well as the state governments are trying to collaborate and cooperate in terms of providing the maintainers or the guides whatever facilities or financial help they are in need of. The 15 different biological centers or biological resource centers that are located in India are: number 1, Gulf of Mannar, located in Tamil Nadu, followed by Sundarbans, that is in West Bengal. These are actually the largest ones in terms of not only the area but also in terms of whatever biological wealth they have within these. Then we have Nanda Devi, situated in Uttaranchal, Nilgiri, that is Tamil Nadu, Kerala and Karnataka. This is actually distributed in 3 states, and all 3 states play a collaborative role in the maintenance of this biosphere reserve. Dihang Dibang, that is in Arunachal Pradesh, Pachmari, that is in Madhya Pradesh, Simlipal, that is in Orissa, Achankamar and Amarkantak, that is in Madhya Pradesh and Chhattisgarh. Again, these 2 states together cooperate and maintain this biological wealth in this reserve. Manas in Assam, Kanchenjunga in Sikkim, Agasthamali in Kerala, Great Nicobar in Andaman and Nicobar Islands, Nokrek in Meghalaya, Dibru Saikova in Assam, and the latest biosphere reserve that was created in Gujarat is Gayan Bharati. Now, once we look at these 15 biosphere reserves, it has been seen that not only with every passing year the density and diversity is increasing of whatever biological resources are maintained, but they are also helping us to maintain whatever ecological conditions are useful for these biological resources. The second important in situ conservation site is the national park. Even though the term is national, but generally whatever the location of these national parks is, be it one state or be it a couple of states together, the maintenance of these national parks is to be governed regularly by the state government or the 2 state governments, so that whatever biological resources are lying in these, they are regularly assessed in terms of whatever physical as well as biological conditions are to be either modified or provided, physical or other resources, so that whatever wealth is lying, or that is in terms of plants, in terms of animals, in terms of microbes, in terms of water, in terms of nutrient, etc., that is maintained to facilitate the survival of the biological entities within these national parks. The most national parks have a dual role, that is, where they not only help us to protect whatever biological wealth is lying, be it an animal or a plant, but also help us to maintain whatever physical facilities, that is soil, water, minerals, nutrients, are lying or are being provided by the natural resources. And once we assess them, that also helps us to maintain whatever biological wealth we have tried to store in these national parks. Now, it is said that in India, the first national park was established way back in 1935, and it was known as Haley National Park. It was actually formed by the British rulers, but at present it has been modified not only in terms of its infrastructure but also renamed as Jim Corbett National Park. By 1970, India had only 5 national parks. However, in 1972, Government of India tried to reassess what is the density and diversity and distribution of the biological wealth, and it has helped us to not only increase the number of national parks, but also helped us to modify the infrastructure as well as the parameters, which will help us not only maintaining but also reassessing regularly whatever biological wealth is being maintained in these national parks. At present, total of 166 national parks have been authorized, even though only a part of them have been fully formed and are being regularly assessed. Now, once we look at these national parks, we have seen that in terms of habitat, in terms of diversity, they are variable. And this in turn helps us to see that varied habitats provide us varied and different types of biodiversity resources, and if these parks are maintained, it will automatically and naturally help us to not only diversify what we try to protect, but also diversify the wealth of biological resources in whole of India, and for future generations, whatever resources we have identified, they can actually substantiate that by reassessing the value and quality of the resources maintained in these national parks. Then the next in situ conservation strategy is establishment of wildlife sanctuaries. Again, as the name indicates, the concept is of protecting whatever wild biological resources, be it plant, be it animal, be it microbe, or the habitat itself, is essentially in need of conservation and protection. In wildlife sanctuary, we have diverse resources. Sometimes we may have density of plant habitats, sometimes we may have diversity of animals as well as animal habitats, and sometimes we may have microbial density and diversity of their habitats also. And in a wildlife sanctuary, we will have a huge distribution pattern as well as diverse wealth, biological wealth, and this in turn will automatically, with every passing year, diversify whatever wealth we have tried to protect at the start of the creation of this wildlife sanctuary, but also will help us to re-monitor and reassess what needs and necessities are to be created or to be modified in terms of the increase in number of populations as well as variability in the habitats that has been induced by diverse biological resources. Now, in India, at present we have 502 well-established wildlife sanctuaries. Even though number may seem huge, but once we look at what sort of resources we have in whole of India, it is possible that one may try to modify not only the number but also the area of these 502 wildlife sanctuaries. The plan of Government of India as well as the maintenance of these wildlife sanctuaries is to assess and modify not only the space and structure of wildlife sanctuaries, but if a need arises, increase the number of wildlife sanctuaries so that whatever wild biological resources we want to protect and preserve and properly utilize is maintained not only for present but also for the progenial generation. If we look at the area that is covered by these 502 wildlife sanctuaries, it is established to be 117,291.03 square kilometers. It's a huge area, but once we compare it with the area of India, it is only 3.57% of the whole area of India. That means the number is huge, but the area occupied by these wildlife sanctuaries is not as huge as the need on the basis of these biological resources is. And on this basis, Government of India has planned that another 217 wildlife sanctuaries will be established within the next decade, which will occupy another area of about 16,669.44 square kilometers. This is as per the data available with DBT. Now again, once we look at the distribution pattern of these wildlife sanctuaries, the most important information is that Andaman and Nicobar, even though a small island, has 96 wildlife sanctuaries, even though they occupy a small area, but this number is actually depicting what sort of diverse biological resources are located in Andaman and Nicobar Island. On the basis of the number, one may always presume that Andaman and Nicobar is having the largest area under this particular conservation site, but once we compare it to the total area, it is only occupying 4.58% of the state or that union territory area, depicting that area is not related to the number, but the number is in turn related to what diversity of biological resources is located in Andaman and Nicobar, which sometime in future may be labeled as a biodiversity hotspot of Indian subcontinent also. Next important site of in situ conservation is wetlands. As the name depicts, wetlands are those sites which are located in aquatic habitats, and whatever biological wealth, be it plant, animal, micro, or the habitat itself that is lying in these wetlands, that obviously has tremendous potential in terms of not only maintaining the biological resources, but also with every passing year modifying the habitat conditions as well as whatever diverse biological resources are lying. Now, once we look at wetlands, the first thing that comes to mind is it's perhaps those habitats in which the water is dominant. But once we compare this with the selected wetlands, the difference only lies in that wetland is an intermediate site between dry habitat and an extremely wet habitat that is usually labeled sometimes as a marshy condition. And these marshy conditions in turn also show variability in terms of not only habitat but also whatever diverse biological resources are lying. If it is an aquatic marsh, in those aquatic marsh that is where water is dominant, we may find hydrophytic plants dominant. If it is terrestrial marsh, that is where soils are more dominant, in those we will find those plants growing which have a better preference for slightly drier conditions. And such habitats are usually seen either on the banks of rivers, on the banks of lakes, or along the shores of seas. But within these different wetland habitats, diverse conditions in turn induce diversity of biological resources. And in India, as we all know, about 70% of the coastal parts are usually showing marshy conditions. We have seen that those areas depict varied habitats, which in turn also show varied biological wealth. Distribution pattern of these wetlands or these conservation sites, once we assess them, has been seen to be mostly located in those areas where the marshy conditions are dominant, and on the basis of these, the distribution has been allocated to selected sites where diversity of biological resources is much more dominant compared to similar habitats where diversity of biological resources is not as dominant. And in India, some of the important sites are once we look at the distribution pattern of these, we have seen that the wetlands are usually located in those areas where the aquatic conditions are in the vicinity and terrestrial habitats are dominantly used for cultivation purposes, especially for commercial crops. And in a few locations, it is also seen that the orchards or fruit plantation sites are also on the sites, depicting thereby that the cultivation lands are perhaps providing whatever raw material is needed by the biological wealth located in these wetlands. Then next is the mangrove. The mangroves are those habitats in which the trees and shrubs which have a preference to grow in saline waters, especially in the coastal parts of India, are actually located. Now, usually, saline habitats have been seen to negatively affect not only the growth of the plant, but sometimes affect the quality and the quantity of the product that is produced by the plants. However, within these saline habitats, we have seen important plants growing which actually utilize saline quality of the water as well as habitat by producing those active components and those products which are commercially as useful as those plants or animals or microbes which normally grow on the clean and salinity-free habitats. In these coastal parts, usually we have seen that bamboo is much more dominant. Yet, in addition to bamboo, we have other plants, especially growing in coastal parts, which cannot survive or adapt to those areas where salinity of the soil or salinity of the aquatic conditions is missing, thereby depicting that they have adapted to saline conditions by inheriting from their ancestors the adaptability pattern as well as potential to resist to whatever negativities are attributed by saline habitat conditions to the productive potential of those plants, animals as well as microbes. Now, mangroves usually support unique ecosystems also where whatever biological wealth we have, that biological wealth is in turn automatically directing the terrestrial habitats in utilizing whatever resources are produced by these for their benefits. Generally, it has been seen that we sometimes try to dig out soil a couple of meters away from coastal parts, and that soil in turn yields much fresher and much better water as compared to what we see in the sea itself, depicting thereby that salinity of the water is being filtrated by the mangroves, and those in turn provide the coastal habitats fresh water as well as other components, biologically more active components, which can help us to commercially cultivate other crops on the coastal terrestrial habitats. Now, in India, 34 mangroves have been identified, and all these mangroves have been seen to be rich in diverse biological resources, most of them used either directly for consumption purposes or extraction of active components for medicinal purposes, or sometimes even extraction of those components which are used for manufacture of paints, varnishes, as well as fibrous compounds, which can be used for textile manufacturing also. These mangroves are These 34 mangroves are considered to be the diverse plant and animal and microbial wealth, primarily because they are located in those sites in which ordinarily no plants can be cultivated or no animals can be domesticated, primarily because of the salinity of the water. And these mangroves in turn are sometimes labeled as different biological centers, where the plants, animals and microbes show varied adaptability patterns as well as potential to produce whatever is the net result of their life cycles. And this in turn shows us that sometimes those areas which we label as unreachable or unuseful sites can be also useful for maintenance of whatever biological resources we have. The next one, in situ conservation site, is actually labeled as coral reefs. Now, these coral reefs are aragonite structures produced by living organisms, especially found in shallow tropical but marine habitats. Again, this depicts that salinity of the water is vital in terms of facilitating the survival of the coral reefs, as well as maintenance of whatever biological wealth is produced by these reefs. Now, in general, the coral reefs are actually the components which have an adaptability to those soils or those habitats which are poorest in terms of organic components or in terms of nutrient status, depicting thereby that such habitats ordinarily cannot be useful either for humans directly or for commercially cultivated plants or domesticated animals. Yet, within these habitats, the reefs, we have seen that some important biological resources are surviving and converting an improper wealth, that is, those conditions of the natural habitat which cannot be consumed by us, into a biological resource which at present is labeled as something that cannot be manufactured or synthesized, even though we have huge amount of biological resources or technical facilities available. Now, in these coral reefs, whatever net result is, that is to be harvested, but at the time of harvesting, one has to be very cautious in terms of depicting or analyzing what the age of a reef is. Ordinarily, every reef is actually an end product or end result of the life cycle of a microbial entity surviving in saline habitats. And usually, this can be at varied phases of the life cycle if we touch it. In the life cycle period, it has been seen that if one accidentally touches it, it may be as sharp as a spine and sometimes can injure the harvester or collector drastically and can result in death or sometimes cause major injuries in the collectors. However, if it is regularly monitored and seen that the life cycle of the microbial component is complete and its shell or its covering is mature, at that stage one can manually harvest it either mechanically or by using physical instruments, and this mangrove in turn, this coral reef in turn can help us to facilitate harvesting biological results in not only utilizing it improperly at the end but also trying to manufacture those products which ordinarily are not available on terrestrial habitats. Now, in India, up to present, only 4 reefs have been identified, and these reefs are located in the coastal parts, especially in southern India, and are named as within these 4 reefs, it has been seen that there is not only diversity of reefs but also diversity of the habitats in which these reefs are located. Now, these 6 in situ conservation sites have been localized by the Government of India, and in these sites, the density and diversity of biological resources is maintained and regularly assessed, depicting thereby that once biological resources are assessed, one should always try to see what strategies or what methods are suitable for not only their proper utilization but their maintenance, so that progenies will not suffer for the lack of what biological resources are located in these. It means that in situ conservation will help us to maintain 4 important biological sites for not only present but for progenies also, which may in future see density and diversity of the biological resources as well as habitats modified, depicting thereby that if we maintain what is lying at present, progenies will see much better and much diverse resources for their benefit and help us to collaborate and cooperate with other physical and biological entities. I hope that all of you are aware of the need of conservation, will try to assess what the potential of these sites is and facilitate their maintenance and their cooperative and collaborative attitude. I also hope that those of you who want to visit these sites should, prior to visiting, seek permission and at the time of visit not touch or destroy whatever natural density and diversity of physical and biological resources is lying in these in situ conservation sites. Thank you.